In this presentation, I will provide conclusive physical evidence for the electric universe's role in the formation of planets by directly connecting many famous plasma crater and maria on the Moon to specific land formations on Earth. This new evidence forces us to revive, explain, and embrace a new Earth vision model based on thermodynamic fractal bifurcation and electric universe principles. It will eliminate the giant impact of lunar formation and call into question the nature of planetary collisions. Within the electric universe community, a great debate regarding the theories of planetary formation has been simmering for years, mostly unnoticed. While Thornhill has suggested an ejection birth model of planetary creation, there are, of course, amended versions of accretion floating around. And Hans Alfrens, Stewart and David Talbot, and others have proposed a planetary formation process driven by Z-pinches and Birkeland currents. It is readily conceded in scientific circles that neither the heavy bombardment impact thesis nor the lunar volcanism hypothesis of lunar mare formation can explain all the evidence found on the Moon. My primary thesis is a new way of thinking about the creation of the Earth and Moon, as well as how plate tectonics and the lunar maria came into being. I believe I have found evidence that the Moon directly shaped the Earth's surface and crustal boundaries while in low orbit during the early days of the Earth and Moon's formations, and that this process can be traced, tracked, and quantified using the lunar mares and craters to offer great insights into many fields of science. No one really thinks about how the Moon escaped low Earth orbit to reach its current distance. However, all the models suggest that the Moon would have periodically approached and moved away from the Earth as its orbit was rounded out. Bow theory proposes a coherent mechanism for how that process shaped the Earth and Moon's surfaces. This is a thermodynamically driven bifurcation process for stars, planets, and moons based on perpendicular axial tilt, changing phase to become parallel, with mass ejected proportionate to create the fractal pattern that we see everywhere in the cosmos. For those unfamiliar with lunar formation theories, the leading theory is that a Mars-sized planetoid in the early solar system crashed into the Earth, and the debris from this impact then accreted into the Moon. This is called the giant impact hypothesis, and it's been the accepted model of Moon formation for about 50 years. Of course, accretion and the nebular hypothesis of solar system formation began about 250 years ago with Kant and still can't solve the meter barrier problem. So everyone agrees. There are many questions and variables that remain unresolved within this theory. And in recent years, more and more chemical evidence has challenged the core assumptions of this theory. So, my intuition tells me that the models that we are envisioning are incorrect in a fundamental way due to this contradiction. Every model I've seen of the giant impact hypothesis shows a Theia careening in at Earth on a straight line, with both planets being shattered as a result. And something about that always struck me as odd, or somehow oversimplistic. And what I think is missing is a lack of spin for the proposed incoming Theia. To say it more precisely, the direction of Theia's axis of spin would have become more perpendicular to Earth's relative to its proximity to Earth. That is to say, the closer Theia got to Earth, the more likely its spin would have been reorientated towards Earth's gravity center. Now, the models of a Mars-sized Theia impactor are predicated on this occurring with perfect conditions for a low-velocity, oblique impact. In at least Dr. Canup's same-sized Earth-Theia collision model, she specifically describes a scenario with no spin and similar orbits. In 2012, she proposed two equally sized bodies colliding, then coalescing and recolliding. While current mainstream thought considers the formation of the Moon and the lunar mares as separate incidents, this model contends that they were directly related. The two leading theories of lunar mare formation are comet-sized impacts from the debris of the giant impact, or lunar volcanism, or some combination of the two. The evidence I've found indicates that the lunar mares were actually the focal points of a series of close encounters with the Earth's surface while it was still only partially coalesced. I propose that a process of lunar surface plasmification during multiple near-Earth approaches offers a more coherent explanation for lunar mares and eliminates the incongruities and problems inherent in both the leading mare formation theories. These approaches, or impacts as I will refer to them, shape the lunar mares due to the nature of the Moon's perpendicular to surface spin while approaching the Earth.
The mare impacts would have likely occurred during a more direct approach than Dr. Canup envisioned, with the result being that contact between the Earth and Moon appears to have been forestalled by the electromagnetic forces released. These forces both push the Moon away as well as cause the Moon to shed mass. In any case, there is substantial evidence of multiple impressions for each mare when turned in different directions at each impact location. During these events, the Moon would have shed matter, causing crustal loss and gravity sinks that eventually lightened the Moon's mass enough for it to escape low Earth orbit. The places where significant amounts of crust were blown away then eventually settled into the lunar mares. Of course, this close in orientation is implausible according to physics. The Roche limit is 6,000 miles and approximately Earth's diameter, and so if they were equal sized, you can imagine an imaginary third sphere between them as their Roche limit, and you could plausibly get a plasma vortex resonance between them.
However, the more plausible and logical explanation is that love is electric and planets are born through this bifurcation process, because this is where Earth vision, lunar vision, and cosmology all got hung up, was not being able to see this change from prolate to oblate. And the orientation of exoplanets that we've been finding, such as Kepler 10b, which is extremely close to its sun, extremely hot, and rotates extremely fast with a very short orbital period, changes the moment of inertia in the celestial body and allows bifurcation to happen, because the old model was predicated on parallel axial tilts, and with a perpendicular axial tilt, it's much more easy for the bifurcation process to take hold and cause instability in the body itself, which then leads to separations. And this is just like life, and why the model of life and populations, they use the same equations. And so this is why I propose that the binaries we see are actually dividing, and that populations and planets and systems all grow in the same manner, with our descendants giving us stability and spreading out the system in a natural logarithmic pattern. Because planets and stars without a satellite lack axial stability, and without axial stability they lack regular periodicity, which is by definition order and a prerequisite for the ability for life to thrive. The interchangeability of the inverse square law and Rayleigh numbers actually indicates that the electromagnetic universe and the thermodynamic fractal universe are exactly the same, which is why I've proposed we can use the Rayleigh number from the Lorentz equations to predict orbital and rotational periodicity and its relation to pole shifts and precession as a consequence of planetary birth. And the smaller bodies that we see in the system are the children of the larger ones. This necessitates a reimagining of the way we think about mass, angular momentum, and gravity in a way that the electric universe has already proposed. But it must incorporate the wisdom that the electric universe is fractal as well. This belies the fact that gravity is not very well understood, and the recent work of scientists in the electric universe who have tied gravity and electricity together, which may very well change the way we think about the density of the Earth and Moon as they approached. Equally, Dan Winter's fractal model of cosmology and gravity greatly informed this model.
Due to the inherent torus vortex pattern of this energy exchange, the shadow of the process can still be seen and reconstructed because the pattern is actually inherent throughout the universe.
By elucidating the pattern of crater distribution on the Moon that clearly corresponds to an electrical discharge pattern, we have the conclusive proof that Earth and the Moon were formed electrically.
The effect of the Earth-directed material from the Moon would have acted like a thruster, and the effect of periphery-ejected material would have been similar to the effects of the yo-yo D-spin technique used by rocket scientists to slow a rocket's trajectory in space.
Of course, you are all aware
That many of Earth's other mysterious land formations have been recreated from plasma discharges in the lab on a small scale. For example, the haunting mesas of the American Southwest and river patterns, as well as lunar crater shapes, are easily recreated by plasma discharges in the lab.
However, when we include the mare-to-Earth land formation correspondence, we'll be able to map many craters on the Moon to specific land formations on Earth.
The evidence of this is as astounding as it is apparent. Most clearly, the topographical features of the Oceanus Procellarum correlate to either the earliest or the final stage of the Earth-Moon formation process that occurred over the Pacific Ocean. On the Moon, the crater Copernicus appears very near the center of the lunar mare and fault line map.
And when we take the two maps and overlay them and play with the transparency, we can see that there is a correspondence and asymmetry which appears as inverted images. For example, Hawaii between two craters and in the top left where the circle is filled out. It's important to note that this is just one orientation and that when this map is turned slightly, other islands and land masses come into better correlation. And I think this explains why this is the deepest, oldest part of the ocean crust and goes a long way towards vindicating an expanding Earth model as well.
The land formations that resulted from repetitive plasma arc discharges between the Earth and Moon would have thus occurred in a predictable vortex pattern, which we find. This also explains why we see lower elevations in the lunar mares as opposed to higher elevations for volcanic eruptions on Earth. Both theory offers a way to explain the evolution of both the Moon's and Earth's surfaces, as well as explain the mysteries of Earth's plate tectonics. With these numerous alignment in the contours of the fault lines of the Earth and Moon, the correspondence of Pacific islands to lunar craters on the Oceanus Procellarum, and the correspondence between continental land formation and lunar mare shapes, I believe this thesis has ample support for serious consideration to replace, or at least modify, the giant impact hypothesis.
And so, in these times when most of science sees two things coming together to explode, I invite you to remember that love is electric, and two beings coming together don't destroy each other, but rather they create something new. And that is from a different orientation to each other. And through that process, children are born, satellites, moons, stars, planets, asteroids, and meteorites. All are connected in a thermodynamic, fractal electric universe through the exchange of heat, energy, information, and love.